I'm Margarita Gleba. I teach archaeological methodologies at the Department of Cultural Heritage, University of Padova. I have a background in classical and Near Eastern archaeology and biology, and currently I also specialize in the study of archaeological textiles. At the moment, we are starting a project on studying textiles from Bisenzio, where quite a few old finds conserve traces of textiles that were mineralized, meaning that they were preserved thanks to the interaction between metal objects that were deposited in graves and organic materials that were in contact with them. Under certain circumstances, these textiles can be preserved as imprints or as casts of actual textiles. And this allows us to understand the structures, how they're made. This allows us to analyze the materials, whether they're made from plant fibers, from animal fibers, and reconstruct the economy and production of ancient textiles in the past. Here we have a bronze basin from one of the burials at Bisenzio, and it preserves very clear traces of a textile on its exterior in this area, more or less. And I usually start by observing it with a simple magnification lens. It gives me an idea of what type of weave it is in most cases. And also the extent to which the textile covers the object. And then I usually put it under a microscope. This is a digital portable microscope, which is a very useful tool for this kind of research because it allows me to bring it to any museum, to any situation, and attach it to the computer. And I can already observe the textiles without even having more sophisticated microscopes. So here we have already some idea of what the textile looks like. Maybe even go under higher magnification. That's beautiful. You can see quite well the weave, which is what we call tabby or plain weave, the simplest kind of textile where the threads go over one, under one, sort of like most of our kitchen towels made out of linen. And this is probably made out of linen, but I will know this for sure once I take a little sample and later on study it under the scanning electron microscope to identify the fiber. It's a much more sophisticated kind of machine, but that allows you magnifications that are quite high and allows to observe the characteristics of the fiber very well, even when they're quite degraded or mineralized, as in this case. I expect it will be flax or linen, but I will confirm it at a later date once I do this kind of analysis. So it is difficult to say why we have the textile here. It is possible that the object was wrapped in it, which was not an uncommon practice in Iron Age Italy and Europe in general, to preserve objects or also as part of a funerary ritual. But it could also be that the basin was simply put on some textile within the grave that was either part of the clothing of the deceased or a gift, a burial gift in itself. So there are less preserved traces over extended area, which are more difficult to read, to identify. But it gives a pretty good idea of how the textile was made. So the threads are spun in a clockwise direction, which is also typical for Italy during this period. In Egypt, for example, they spun in the counterclockwise direction at the same time. So it's a cultural characteristic that is quite important when we study this kind of material. And the quality is quite good. There are many threads per centimeter, probably about 12 or 15. And that means that people who made it were quite skilled in both spinning and weaving, were quite good at what they were doing. It's a very, very nice example of a textile from this period. Another part of this basin preserves also some fibers. This is more unusual. And again, we will take a small sample of this to see if it will be possible to identify what the raw material is in this case. They're quite fine, so we can exclude them being human hair. Sometimes human hair also gets preserved in these situations when there's a metal object put close in the grave next to the human head of the deceased. But these are very small diameter fibers, so they cannot be human. So it's something else. It could be wool, maybe. In this case, we know that it's a grave of a woman, and often women were deposited with the spinning tools, weaving tools, and possibly also some wool that would have been used for spinning. Women were the primary textile producers in the past, and this was a very important part of their identity as well, and their contribution, economic contribution to the household and to the society. And so this was also recognized during the funerary rituals by the deposition of textile tools in the grave. In this case, it's quite unusual to have this kind of fibrous material, and I'm very curious to find out what material it is, because this may be one of the first instances that we have something like this in an Etruscan burial. Here we have a very unusual find, but we have some examples of these. It's basically a sole of an Etruscan sandal. They were made out of iron, so they would be making a noise when the person wearing them was walking. They're very typically Etruscan and were famous around the Mediterranean. And the curious thing is that it has layers of a textile on the sole, which means that probably there was a textile folded, deposited in the grave, and on top of it the pair of sandals was placed as a burial gift. That at least would be my interpretation. And another surprise is that this textile is of a type that is not typical for Italy during Iron Age. This is more of a type that is produced and common in Eastern Mediterranean, so in Greece and the Near East. This kind of textile arrives with the Greeks in southern Italy and slowly becomes more popular also across central and northern Italy. And by Roman times, in fact, it replaces the more usual twill textiles of Italy. So this is what we call the weft face tabby. It allows production of tapestry. And it's not very well preserved, but we'll see if we can find a nice spot to observe it. It is a very fine, very dense kind of textile. In this case as well, I will be taking some samples to analyze the fiber, but in absolutely all cases where we have such textiles, they're usually made out of sheep wool. Sheep wool has the properties that are particularly suitable for the production of this kind of weave. And in this case, we may also be able to analyze the wool quality, and that also may show us the differences between the Italian material and may prove that this is an import rather than local production. Here we have nice threads of the weft visible that completely cover the warp threads, which would have been under tension on the loom. And these are very extensive traces of textile. Usually we just have very few millimeters. Here we have many layers of the textile visible. There's another spot where we can see the weft. The surface, however, is quite matted, almost felted or fulled, possibly to make it more homogeneous.